I am Avery Taylor, 80 years old. For 40 years, I was a federal judge in Washington, D.C., a life I dedicated to justice. But now, my only son, Congressman Julian Taylor, claims I've lost my mind, orchestrating a perfect performance to have me thrown out on the street. He's dragging me into court, using my Alzheimer's to paint me as a senile old woman in order to seize my entire estate and the political secrets I hold. He has a respected doctor ready to testify to his cruel lie that I need to be protected. My memory may betray me, but a judge's instincts do not. In my rare moments of clarity, I've conducted my own secret investigation and unearthed the filthy connection between that doctor and his campaign's largest donor, a man named Gerald Sterling. He thinks this disease has crushed me, that his senile old mother will be easy to trample. But he's forgotten one thing: I am not just a mother. I am Judge Avery Taylor, and the trial for his crimes is about to begin. The morning light slants through the tall Georgian windows of my study, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. They are like tiny, forgotten memories, swirling without purpose. I was a judge for 40 years. I commanded a courtroom with nothing more than my voice and the weight of the law. Now, I command nothing, not even my own mind. I'm holding a silver pen, a beautiful Mont Blanc my late husband, Robert, gave me when I was appointed to the federal bench. I'm staring at a legal pad. The page is blank. I can't remember what I intended to write. Was it a grocery list, a letter to my sister, or was it something else, something important? A fragment of a thought glints in the fog and then vanishes. It's like trying to catch smoke with your bare hands. "Mother, are you in here?" My son, Julian, stands in the doorway. He is tall and handsome, with Robert's dark hair but with an ambition in his eyes that is entirely his own. He's a congressman now, a rising star, they say. He smiles, but it doesn't quite reach those calculating eyes. It's the kind of smile he uses on the campaign trail, designed to reassure, to charm, to win. "Just thinking, Julian," I say, my voice steadier than I feel. I place the pen down with deliberate care. A judge never shows weakness on the bench. An old habit. "You've been in here for a while," he says, walking in. He glances at the blank notepad. "Everything all right?" "Perfectly fine. I was just organizing my thoughts." It's a lie, but a necessary one. Showing him the cracks in my facade feels like handing him a weapon. He picks up a framed photograph from my desk. It's of me, Robert, and a 10-year-old Julian on a sailboat. Happier times. "I was talking with Isabel last night. We're worried about you, Mom, all alone in this big house." Isabel. His wife, his campaign manager. A woman so polished she seems to have been sculpted from marble. She looks at me not as a mother-in-law, but as a potential liability. "I'm not alone, Julian. I have Alina here 3 days a week, and I am perfectly capable of managing." "Of course you are," he says, his tone placating, the kind one uses on a difficult child. "But your finances, the estate, it's a lot to handle. I could take that burden off your shoulders. Let you just relax. Enjoy your retirement." There it is. The gentle, reasonable-sounding opening salvo in a war I didn't even know had been declared. He's not offering to help. He's offering to take over. "My finances are in perfect order, Julian. Robert and I saw to that years ago. My lawyer, Sarah Jenkins, has everything under control." His smile tightens almost imperceptibly. "Sarah is a good lawyer, for her time, but this is a family matter, don't you think? It just seems prudent to consolidate things." "For your protection." "For my protection." The words echo in the quiet room. How often have I heard lawyers use that exact phrase to strip someone of their autonomy? I look at my son, the boy I taught how to ride a bicycle, the young man I coached for his first debate, and I see a stranger. A strategist. He sees my home not as a place of memories, but as an asset. He sees my legacy not as a matter of principle, but as a collection of political connections to be leveraged. "I will think about it," I say, the dismissal clear in my tone. It's the same tone I used to use in court to signal that a lawyer's line of questioning was over. He gets the message. "Okay, Mom, just know I'm here for you." He kisses my cheek. It feels cold. He leaves and the room feels colder still. The fog begins to roll in again. Why was I so angry? Julian is just trying to help. A good son. But then a flash of clarity, sharp and painful. A memory, not of my past, but of my profession. In Ray Clarkson, 1998. A son used a claim of dementia to seize his mother's company. He liquidated it within 6 months. The legal term is undue influence. The moral term is theft. My hands are shaking. I need to call Sarah. I pick up the phone, my fingers hovering over the keypad. What was her number again? I stare at the phone, my mind a frustrating blank. Alina, my housekeeper, walks in. She's a kind woman, quiet, has been with me for 5 years. "Mrs. Taylor." "Are you all right? You look pale." I'm fine, Alina. Could you find me the number for my lawyer? Sarah Jenkins. She nods, her eyes filled with a pity that I despise. She finds the number in my old Rolodex and dials it for me, handing me the receiver. Avery, is that you? Sarah's voice is a welcome anchor in the shifting fog. Sarah, it's me. I need to see you, as soon as possible. Of course, is everything okay? I think Julian is trying to take control of my estate. The words come out in a rush, a jumble. He said, for my protection. He mentioned family, consolidating. I stop, frustrated, the thread of the conversation slipping away. What did he say exactly? The details are already blurring. Avery, slow down, Sarah says calmly. What did he do? What did he say, word for word? I can't remember, I whisper, the admission tasting like ash. That's the problem, Sarah. I can't remember the specifics, but I remember the feeling, the intent. It was like a motion to dismiss me from my own life. Okay, Avery, I understand. Your instincts are as sharp as ever, even if the details are difficult. Let's meet tomorrow. 10 o'clock, my office. We'll figure this out. We hang up and I feel a surge of panic. By tomorrow, will I even remember this conversation? Will I remember the coldness in Julian's kiss? The strategy in his eyes? The fog is so thick, so relentless. It swallows facts, conversations, names. But it can't swallow instinct. Not yet. I look at the legal pad on my desk. Blank, useless. But then I have an idea, a lifeline. I call Alina back into the room. Alina, I need you to go to the electronics store. I need you to buy me the simplest, highest quality digital voice recorder you can find, one with a single button for record. She looks confused. A voice recorder, Mrs. Taylor? Yes, and you will not mention this to my son, not to his wife, not to anyone. Do you understand? She hesitates, then nods. Yes, Mrs. Taylor. When she leaves, I sit in my chair, the silence of the big house pressing in on me. The light has shifted. The dust motes are gone. I feel a moment of startling lucidity, a gift, and I know I have to use it. When Alina returns with the recorder, I will begin my own testimony. I will create a record. When the fog lifts, for 5 minutes or 5 hours, I will speak my evidence into that little machine. I will document Julian's words, my suspicions, my memories as they surface. I may be a failing witness to my own life, but I'll be damned if I don't leave a docket for my lawyer to fight with. This house is my history. My name is my legacy. I presided over the law for 40 years. I will not let my own son use my illness to make a mockery of it. And of me? Later that evening, the television is on. A news program. Julian is on the screen, shaking hands at a fundraiser, his perfect smile firmly in place. Then the screen cuts to his chief political rival, Senator Michael Thorne. Thorne is speaking at a podium, looking grim. The chyron at the bottom of the screen reads, Senator Thorne denies allegations in Sterling Industries scandal. Sterling Industries, the name, it rings a bell distant and deep. A case. It was my case. United States v. Sterling et al. A complicated fraud case years ago. I stare at Thorne's face. There's a connection, something about that case and him, something Julian would want. What was it? The memory is a locked file in a cabinet at the back of my mind, and I can't find the key. The news anchor's voice fades into a murmur. The fog is coming back. But before it consumes me, I grasp one solid thought. The Sterling case. It's important, terribly important. And I know, with the chilling certainty that was once my stock in trade, that this is about more than just my money. Much more. When Alina returns, she hands me the small, black recorder. It fits perfectly in the palm of my hand. I wait until I am alone, the house settled into the deep quiet of the night. I press the small red button. A tiny light blinks on. This is Avery Taylor, I begin, my voice a low whisper in the darkness of my study. Record entry 1. October 25th. My son, Julian Taylor, visited today. He proposed to manage my affairs. His words were, for your protection. This is a preliminary move to establish a conservatorship. I believe his motives are not born of concern, but of ambition. Also, Senator Michael Thorne, the Sterling Industries case. There is a file, a sealed file. I need to remember what's in that file. I stop the recording. I hold the small device in my hand. It feels heavy, heavy with the weight of the fight to come. It is my memory. It is my witness. It is my gavel. And the trial of Avery Taylor has just begun. The next morning, I meet Sarah at her office. It's a sleek, modern space, a stark contrast to the mahogany and leather I was used to. Sarah is sharp, dressed in a tailored gray suit, her tablet in hand. She listens patiently as I try to explain, my narrative fractured and looping back on itself. He wants control, Sarah, but it's not just the house. I lean forward, my voice dropping. It's about my files, my old cases. Avery, your case files are archived with the federal court. Julian can't touch them. Not all of them, I insist. A judge's personal notes, a draft opinion that was never published, sealed evidence, things that don't make it into the official record. I kept meticulous records, you know that. I do, she says gently. The best in the business, but what would Julian want with them? Senator Thorne, I say, the name a solid rock in the swirling waters of my confusion. He's Julian's opponent in the next election. I presided over the Sterling case. He was involved, not as a defendant, as a witness, or something more. I can't grasp it. I pull the small recorder from my purse and place it on her desk. I started a record, for you, for the court if it comes to that. Sarah picks it up, turning it over in her hands. A flicker of deep respect crosses her face. Avery, this is brilliant. Your mind, it's still a fortress, even if the guards at the gate are sometimes asleep. She looks me straight in the eye. Okay, Judge. Let's fight. The first thing we need to do is formalize your power of attorney and healthcare directive, reaffirming me as your agent, not Julian. We'll get it signed, notarized, and filed today. It creates a new, solid legal barrier. He'll challenge it, I say. He'll say I wasn't of sound mind. Let him try, Sarah says, a fierce grin spreading across her face. He wants to put your mind on trial? Fine. He has no idea what he's up against. He may have the political machine, but we have something better. We have you. Leaving her office, I feel a sliver of hope. But as I step out into the bright, noisy DC street, the world seems to tilt. The sounds are too loud, the colors too bright. For a terrifying moment, I don't know where I am. I don't recognize the street. My heart pounds in my chest. A man in a suit jostles past me, and I stumble. Panic, cold and absolute, floods my veins. I am lost. Then, a hand on my arm. Mrs. Taylor, it's me, Mark O'Connell. I was your clerk back in 6. I look up into a kind, familiar face. The name clicks into place. Mark, yes, a fine clerk, the best. Are you all right, Judge? You look a little lost. Just disoriented for a moment, I manage to say. Let me get you a cab, he says, his concern genuine. As he hails one, he asks, are you still following politics? Your son is really making waves. Though I have to say, that fight with Senator Thorne is getting ugly. Thorne, I repeat. The Sterling case. Mark's eyebrows shoot up. Wow, you have a memory like a steel trap, Judge. That's right. Thorne was the U.S. attorney who brought the case to you. There were always whispers that he cut a deal with the key witness, a man named Russo, to keep his own name out of it. Nothing was ever proven, of course. It all got sealed. And just like that, a piece of the puzzle slides into place. Russo, the witness. Sealed testimony. Thorne buried something, and Julian knows it. The cab pulls up, and Mark helps me in. It was good to see you, Judge. You too, Mark, I say, and as the cab pulls away, I'm already reaching into my purse for the recorder. The fog is lifting. The cab ride home was a bubble of intense clarity. The city sped past in a blur, but my mind was a quiet, focused space. I didn't wait until I was in my study. I took out the recorder right there in the back of the taxi, the leather seat cool against my skin, and pressed the button. Record entry 2, I said, my voice low and urgent. Met former clerk Mark O'Connell. He confirmed Senator Thorne's involvement in United States v. Sterling. Thorne was the U.S. attorney. Key witness was named Russo. Testimony was sealed. Mark mentioned whispers of a deal Thorne cut with Russo to protect himself. This is the motive. Julian needs that sealed testimony to create leverage, to blackmail Thorne. This is not about my well-being. This is about political assassination. I clicked the recorder off, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was a solid theory, a provable case. All I needed was the evidence, the file. When I arrived home, Alina met me at the door, her brow furrowed with worry. You have been gone a long time, Mrs. Taylor. Your son called, and his wife. I'm sure they did, I said, handing her my coat. Thank you, Alina. I'll be in my study. Mrs. Taylor, she said, stopping me. His wife, Mrs. Isabel, she is coming over this afternoon. She said something about helping you organize. A cold dread washed over me. Organize, a benign word for a hostile act. My study was my sanctuary, the last bastion of my ordered mind. Every book, every file, every paperweight was a piece of my memory, placed just so. Isabel's idea of organizing would be a strategic demolition. She arrived precisely at 2 o'clock, dressed in a cream-colored pantsuit that probably cost more than Alina's monthly salary. She carried a sleek tablet and wore a scent that was clean and sterile, like a hospital. Avery, she said, kissing the air beside my cheek. So good to see you looking rested. The subtext was clear. You look old and tired. Isabel, this is an unexpected surprise, I said, not rising from my armchair. Oh, Julian and I just feel terrible that you're saddled with all this. She gestured vaguely around the room at the towering shelves of law books, the meticulously ordered desk. "It's so dense, we thought we could help you digitize, modernize, create a simpler environment for you." "My environment is perfectly fine. It suits me," I said, my voice dangerously level. "Of course," she said with a bright, dismissive smile. "But imagine having all of these books on a simple tablet, and these old files." She walked over to my personal filing cabinets, the ones containing my notes and correspondence, and ran a finger over the brass handle. "They must be a fire hazard. We could scan them all into the cloud for you, so much safer." She was looking for the file. She was doing it right in front of me, cloaking her search in the language of patronizing concern. "You will not touch my files, Isabel," I said. The authority in my voice, the old judicial tone, made her pause. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Avery, we're just trying to help. Julian has found a wonderful service, very discreet, they'll handle everything. The only service I require at the moment, Isabel, is for you to join me for a cup of tea and then to see yourself out. My files are my own." Her eyes narrowed. The polished mask slipped, revealing the cold ambition beneath. "Julian was right. You are being difficult. He said you might resist. It's a symptom, you know. An inability to accept help. It is a right, Isabel, the right to privacy. Perhaps you should look it up." She left soon after, the tension in the room so thick I could feel it suffocating me. The visit was a reconnaissance mission. They were probing my defenses, seeing how hard I would push back, and I knew the next assault would be more direct. It came 2 days later. Julian arrived alone this time. He found me in the garden with Alina, tending to my roses. He waited until Alina had gone inside to fetch a glass of water. "Mom, we need to talk about Alina." I straightened up, my back aching. "What about her?" "She's a good woman, but she's a housekeeper, not a caregiver. You need someone with professional training, someone who can monitor you, make sure you're taking your medication, that you're safe. Alina keeps me safe, and she is my friend." "I think she's taking advantage of you," he said, his voice laced with false sincerity. "This big house, a steady paycheck, it's a comfortable position for her. How do we know she has your best interests at heart? Maybe she's the one who is misplacing things, confusing you." I stared at him, my blood running cold. He was trying to poison me against the one person in this house I trusted. He was trying to isolate me completely. "Alina has never stolen so much as a paperclip from this house, Julian. She is a woman of impeccable character. More than I can say for some politicians I know." The barb hit its mark, a flash of anger in his eyes. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. Your paranoia is getting worse. You're turning on everyone who is trying to help you. I've made an appointment with Dr. Evans for next week. He specializes in geriatric psychology. He's just going to come by the house for an informal chat." "You will cancel that appointment," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "You will not bring a doctor into my home to assess me as if I were a piece of contested property." "It's for your own good, Mom," he insisted, his voice rising. "Do you want to end up like Robert's aunt, lost in her own home, a danger to herself? The court will see this as neglect on my part if I don't act." He was already building his case. He would argue that he had tried to provide care, but that I, in my delusional state, had refused it. Every protest I made, every argument I won, he would twist into another symptom of my decline. I walked away from him, back into the house, my sanctuary. I went straight to my study and locked the door. My hands were shaking. I had to find the Russo file. Now, it was the only thing that could stop this. I started with the most logical place, the safe hidden behind a false panel of law books. The combination was Robert's birthday. Easy. I opened it. Inside were our wills, stock certificates, jewelry, Robert's military medals, but no file. Next, I went to the filing cabinets Isabel had eyed so covetously. These were my personal records, organized by year. I pulled open the drawer for 1999, the year of the Sterling trial. My fingers, papery and thin, sifted through the folders. Correspondence, judicial conference notes, drafts of opinions. It was all there, but not Russo's sealed testimony. Of course not. I would never have kept something so sensitive in a simple locked cabinet. I sat down at my desk, my head throbbing. Where would a judge hide a document so explosive it could end a man's career? A document she felt compelled to keep, but that could not be part of any official record? I closed my eyes, trying to rebuild the mind of my younger self. Judge Avery Taylor, meticulous, cautious, unflappable, she would have created a system, a place of last resort. My eyes snapped open. The bench. Not a real bench. A gift from my clerks when I retired, a small, beautifully carved mahogany replica of my judicial bench. It sat in the corner of the study, a decorative piece. But I remembered the day they gave it to me. I had joked with them. It even has a secret compartment for my contraband evidence. They had laughed. It wasn't a joke. I rushed over to it, my heart pounding. I ran my hands along the smooth wood, searching for a seam, a button, a hidden latch. My fingers traced the intricate carvings along the base, and then I felt it. A tiny, almost imperceptible indentation. I pressed it. A section of the base clicked open, revealing a shallow, felt-lined compartment. It was empty. I sank to my knees, the strength draining out of me. It was gone. He had already found it. Julian or Isabel, they had been in here, they had searched, and they had found it. The game was over. They had won. The fog started to creep in, thick and suffocating, a welcome oblivion from the crushing weight of defeat. I stayed there on the floor, the empty compartment gaping at me like an open wound, and I let the darkness take me. I don't know how long I was there. Elena's frantic knocking at the locked door brought me back. I stumbled to my feet and let her in. Her face was a mask of fear. "Mrs. Taylor, your son is here again, and he has a man with him, a doctor." So he hadn't waited. He was accelerating his timeline. My defeat just moments before ignited into a blaze of pure, defiant fury. He would not do this. Not today, not in my house. I walked out of the study and met them in the grand foyer. Julian stood there with his practiced, concerned smile. Beside him was a man in his 50s with silver hair and a kind, professional demeanor that I knew was a carefully constructed lie. This was Dr. Evans, the executioner of my autonomy. "Mom," Julian began, "this is Dr. Evans. He was in the neighborhood and I asked him to stop by just to say hello." "Doctor," I said, my voice like ice, "you are in my home under false pretenses. You are not a guest. You are an agent of a hostile party. I will not be speaking with you." Dr. Evans looked taken aback, glancing at Julian. Julian's smile vanished, replaced by a look of strained patience. "Mother, please, don't be difficult. The doctor is just here to talk." "I have nothing to say to him, or to you, Julian. I want you both to leave my house. Now." "You see, doctor," Julian said, turning to Evans with a sigh as if I were a toddler throwing a tantrum. "This is what I have to deal with, this belligerence, the paranoia. She thinks everyone is against her." "I think you are against me," I corrected him, my voice ringing with a clarity and force that surprised even myself. "Because you are. You want to have me declared incompetent so you can plunder my assets and my history for your pathetic political ambitions. You are a disgrace to your father's name and a disgrace to me." The doctor took a step back, clearly uncomfortable. Julian's face was white with rage. The mask was gone. This was the real Julian. "That's enough," he hissed, his voice low and venomous. "You've left me no choice. I will be filing the petition for conservatorship in the morning, for your protection." He turned to leave, the doctor scurrying after him. At the door, Julian looked back at me, his eyes cold and hard. "We'll let the court decide what's best for you," he said. Then they were gone. The heavy front door clicked shut, the sound echoing through the silent house like a cell door locking. I stood there, shaking not from fear but from a cold, resolute anger. He had declared war, and he had no idea who he was fighting. He thought he was fighting a confused old woman. He was wrong. He was fighting Judge Avery Taylor, and my courtroom was not yet adjourned. The moment the door closed, the adrenaline that had sharpened my words and steadied my spine began to drain away, leaving a chilling void in its place. The house was silent again, but the silence was different now. It was the silence of a battlefield after the first volley of cannon fire. Elena was standing in the archway to the dining room, her hands pressed to her mouth, her eyes wide with fear. "Mrs. Taylor," she whispered. "What are you going to do?" I looked at her, this kind, loyal woman whom my son had tried to turn into a suspect in my own mind. "I'm going to fight, Elena," I said, and the words helped solidify the resolve that was threatening to crumble. "But I need your help. I cannot trust anyone else in this house." "Anything," she said, her voice firm. "You know that." "First," I said, walking back towards the study, my mind already working, building a case, formulating a strategy. "He thinks I am disorganized, forgetful. We will use that. From this moment on, everything he sees, everything he hears must confirm his narrative. A little confusion, a misplaced object, a forgotten name, we will give him the evidence he thinks he needs while we gather the evidence that will destroy him." Elena looked horrified. "You want to pretend to be worse than you are?" "Precisely. It is a legal tactic. It's called discovery. You let the opposing counsel think they have the upper hand. You let them build their case on a foundation of arrogance. Then, in court, you demolish it, brick by brick. My first call was to Sarah. I told her everything. The visit from Isabel, the confrontation with Julian and the doctor, the empty compartment in the bench. He, filed the petition, Avery, she said, her voice grim. It just came across my desk. He's requested an emergency hearing. He's citing your erratic and paranoid behavior and the imminent risk to your financial and physical well-being. He's asking for a temporary conservatorship pending a full evaluation. He's fast, I conceded. Ambitious. He's a shark who smells blood in the water. The emergency hearing is in 3 days. The judge is Marian Thompson. I felt a small, grim smile touch my lips. Judge Thompson, good, she was my clerk. She's tough, but she's fair. She won't be swayed by Julian's political theater. She won't, Sarah agreed. But she also won't ignore a doctor's testimony and a son's apparent concern. We need to be prepared. We need to counter his narrative, and we need to do it without the Russo file. The file is gone, Sarah. He must have it. Then we have to work on the assumption that he will use it. He won't introduce it in this hearing. It's not relevant to your mental state, but having it gives him the confidence to move forward. He thinks he has the ultimate prize, so he can be ruthless in securing the means to use it. After the call, a wave of exhaustion hit me. The fog was rolling in. I could feel the edges of my thoughts softening, the sharp lines of my strategy blurring. I grabbed the recorder. Record entry 3, I said, my voice weary. Julian has filed for conservatorship. Emergency hearing in 3 days before Judge Marian Thompson. He brought a Dr. Evans to the house. The empty compartment in the bench confirms my suspicion that the Russo file is in Julian's possession. He intends to use my alleged incompetence as the legal cover to access and leverage the contents of that file against Senator Thorne. My strategy: feign worsening symptoms to lull him into overconfidence. At the hearing, Sarah will argue that this is not a case of a concerned son, but a case of political opportunism and undue influence. I placed the recorder back in its hiding place, a hollowed-out copy of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. Then I sat in my chair and let the fog take me. I drifted. I thought of Robert. I thought of the scent of the sea from our sailboat. I tried to remember the name of my favorite rose in the garden. I couldn't. The next 2 days were a blur of calculated performances. When Isabel called to ask how I was, her voice dripping with false sympathy, I sounded confused. I asked who she was twice. I could almost hear the triumphant smirk on the other end of the line. When Julian sent over a caregiver for an interview, a stern-looking woman who was clearly more of a guard than a nurse, I pretended to be agitated and suspicious, refusing to speak to her. I knew they would report every detail back to Julian, painting the exact picture of a deteriorating mind that he wanted to see. Elena played her part perfectly. She would speak to Julian on the phone, her voice filled with feigned worry. "I don't know, Mr. Taylor," she'd say, loud enough for me to hear from the next room. "She seems to be getting worse. She misplaced her glasses again. She called me by her sister's name all morning." It was a dangerous game. Each time I sank into the role of a confused old woman, a small part of me feared I wouldn't be able to climb back out. The line between the performance and the reality of my condition was becoming terrifyingly thin. During these moments, the recorder was my only anchor. The brief windows of clarity were frantic sessions of whispering notes, fears, and legal arguments into the small black device. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my study, the house dark and silent around me. The weight of the next day felt immense. My entire life, my freedom, my identity would be placed in the hands of a judge. I, who had held that power for so long, was now the one being judged. My mind, for once, was clear. The fear kept the fog at bay. I knew Julian's case would be simple and emotionally compelling. A loving son, forced to make a terrible decision to protect his ailing mother. He would have Dr. Evans testify. He would have Isabel's reports of my confusion. He would have the caregiver's account of my paranoia. It would be a powerful narrative. And what did I have? The word of a woman who admittedly suffered from memory loss. It wasn't enough. I needed more. I needed to find a crack in his case. I closed my eyes and thought about Julian, not my son but the politician. He was ambitious, yes, but also incredibly careful. He built his public persona on a foundation of integrity and family values. An image. All politicians build an image, and sometimes in their haste they use faulty materials. Suddenly, an idea. It was a long shot, a wild card, but it was all I had. I called Sarah. It was past midnight, but I knew she'd be awake, preparing. "Sarah," I said, my voice low. "I need you to do something for me. First thing in the morning, I need you to run a background check, a deep financial background check." "On who, Avery?" "On Dr. Evans," I said, "the geriatric specialist." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "You think he's compromised?" I think a rising political star like my son doesn't just find a specialist who was in the neighborhood. He finds an asset. Check his finances, his political donations. Look for any connection, no matter how tenuous, to Julian's campaign or his known donors. Look for a conflict of interest. It's a fishing expedition, Avery, and we have less than 9 hours until the hearing. Then fish fast, Sarah, I said and hung up. I knew it was a gamble, but in court, sometimes all you need is one loose thread. If you can pull on it hard enough, the entire tapestry of lies can unravel. The morning of the hearing, I dressed with meticulous care. I chose a dark navy suit, the one I had worn for my own investiture ceremony. My hands trembled as I put on the simple pearl earrings Robert had given me. Elena helped me with the clasp. "You look like a judge again," she whispered, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Today, I am the defendant," I reminded her softly. Julian and Isabel were already at the courthouse when we arrived. They stood with their lawyer, a slick man in a tailored suit. They rushed over to me, Julian putting his arm around my shoulder in a public display of affection that was nauseating. "Mom, you don't have to do this," he said, his voice low for the cameras that had suddenly appeared. "We can handle this privately." I pulled away from him. "Your petition made this a public matter, Julian," I said, looking directly into the lens of a news camera. "Let the public see." Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was suffocating. I sat at the respondent's table with Sarah. I felt a wave of disorientation. For a moment, I thought I was on the wrong side of the room. I gripped the edge of the table, grounding myself. Judge Thompson entered, and we all rose. She was exactly as I remembered her, sharp, no-nonsense, with eyes that missed nothing. She looked at me, a brief, unreadable expression on her face, before turning to Julian's lawyer. "Mr. Davies, you may begin." Julian's lawyer laid out their case. He painted a picture of a brilliant woman in tragic decline. He spoke of Julian's love and concern. He called Dr. Evans to the stand. The doctor was smooth, professional, and convincing. He described his informal visit to my home. He used clinical terms like anosognosia, a lack of insight into one's own illness. He spoke of my agitation and paranoid delusions about my son's motives. "In my professional opinion," he concluded, looking at Judge Thompson with sincere gravity, "Judge Taylor is at a stage where she can no longer safely manage her own affairs. A temporary conservatorship under the guidance of her son is, I believe, a medical necessity." It was a powerful, damaging testimony. I could feel the weight of it settling over the room. Judge Thompson was making notes, her expression grim. Then it was Sarah's turn to cross-examine. She approached the witness stand, her tablet in her hand. "Dr. Evans," she began, her voice calm, "you are a respected specialist in your field. So respected, in fact, that last year you were appointed to the board of a prominent medical research foundation, were you not?" "Yes, that's correct," the doctor said, looking slightly surprised. "The Northgate Medical Foundation," Sarah continued. "A fine institution. And one whose primary benefactor, its largest donor for the past 5 years, is a man named Mr. Gerald Sterling, of Sterling Industries." A stunned silence fell over the courtroom. I stared at Dr. Evans. His professional calm had shattered. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple. Sarah continued, her voice like a surgeon's scalpel. "Is it not true, doctor, that Mr. Sterling is also the single largest donor to Congressman Julian Taylor's re-election campaign? And is it not also true that your appointment to that very lucrative board position was personally championed by Mr. Sterling, at the specific request of my client's son, Congressman Taylor?" She swiped her finger on the tablet, and a document appeared on the screen in front of the witness stand. "This is an email from Congressman Taylor to Mr. Sterling, dated 6 months ago. It reads, 'Jerry, I have a candidate for the Northgate board who could be a great friend to us. Dr. Alan Evans, let's make it happen.' Doctor, is this not the very definition of a conflict of interest? How can this court trust your professional opinion when your career is being so handsomely underwritten by the man who stands to gain everything from your testimony?" Dr. Evans stared at the email, his face ashen. He stammered. He tried to explain, but it was too late. The thread had been pulled. The tapestry was unraveling. And for the first time that day, Judge Thompson looked over at my son, Julian, and her expression was one of pure, unadulterated contempt. The courtroom was a vacuum of stunned silence. Dr. Evans, who had been so poised and authoritative moments before, now looked like a cornered animal. He stuttered, trying to formulate a defense, but Sarah didn't give him an inch. "Doctor," she pressed on, her voice cutting through his feeble attempts to explain. "Let me be very clear. Were you, or were you not, aware that your primary financial benefactor was also the primary financial backer of the man petitioning this court. My work with the foundation is separate from my clinical practice, he managed, wiping his brow with a handkerchief. Is it? Sarah shot back. Or is it simply a discreet way for Congressman Taylor to purchase a favorable medical opinion, an opinion you were all too willing to provide when he called upon you to pay back his patronage? Objection. Julian's lawyer, Mr. Davies, was on his feet, his face flushed. Counsel is badgering the witness and making unsubstantiated accusations. Sustained, Judge Thompson said, her voice flat, but her eyes were fixed on Dr. Evans, and they held a cold fury that was far more damning than any overruled objection. Strike the last question. Ms. Jenkins, move on. I have no further questions for this witness, Your Honor, Sarah said, turning and walking back to our table with a calm that belied the seismic shock she had just sent through the room. The rest of Julian's case crumbled. He had built it on the foundation of Dr. Evans's credibility, and now that foundation was rubble. Mr. Davies called Isabel to the stand, but her testimony about my confusion now sounded petty and self-serving. He tried to call the caregiver, but Sarah successfully argued that her testimony was biased and irrelevant given the tainted nature of her hiring. Finally, Julian himself took the stand. He tried to reclaim the narrative, to present himself once again as the devoted, heartbroken son. He spoke of my legacy, my brilliant mind, and the tragedy of its decline. He looked at me, his eyes pleading, trying to forge a connection, a moment of sympathy. I love my mother, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Everything I am doing, as difficult as it is because I love her and I want to protect her. It was a masterful performance. I could see it swaying some in the courtroom, but I knew it was a lie, a carefully crafted piece of theater. During his testimony, a memory surfaced, a flash of painful clarity. It was from a year ago at Robert's memorial. Julian had given a beautiful eulogy, full of heartfelt stories. But later, I overheard him speaking to Isabel in the garden. Did it play well? He'd asked. I think the son of a great man angle will be very helpful with the Veterans Caucus. Even his grief was a political calculation. When it was Sarah's turn to cross-examine him, she was quiet, almost gentle. Congressman, she began, you say you want to protect your mother. Are you seeking to protect her from making poor financial decisions? Yes, of course, Julian said. That is a primary concern. Then you'll be happy to know, Sarah said, consulting her notes, that 2 days ago, Judge Taylor met with me and reaffirmed my position as her power of attorney, and we have placed all of her major assets into an irrevocable trust, managed by a neutral third-party financial institution. She can no longer make any significant financial decisions without the approval of the trust, which is legally bound to act in her best interest. So that concern has been addressed, wouldn't you agree? Julian was blindsided. His jaw tightened. I was not aware of that. No, Sarah said. You were not. You also claim to be concerned for her physical well-being. Are you aware that she has a full-time housekeeper, Elena Morales, who has been with her for 5 years and is, by all accounts, devoted to her? I believe Ms. Morales is not qualified. And are you aware, Sarah interrupted smoothly, that yesterday, at my recommendation, Judge Taylor hired a registered nurse with 20 years of geriatric care experience to come in 4 hours every day to assist Ms. Morales and oversee her medical needs. So that concern, too, has been addressed. The trap was closing. Sarah was systematically dismantling his stated reasons for the conservatorship, one by one, exposing them as pretexts. Oh, if her finances are protected, Sarah continued, her voice growing sharper, and her medical care is secure, what is left to protect her from Congressman? Or is this perhaps not about protection at all? Is this about control? Is this about gaining access to her home, to her personal effects, to her private papers? Objection, Davies shouted, leaping up again. Relevance. Overruled, Judge Thompson snapped. The witness will answer the question. Julian looked trapped. This is absurd. What possible interest would I have in my mother's old papers? I can think of one, Sarah said, her voice dropping, drawing everyone in. A sealed file, from the Sterling Industries case. A file containing the testimony of a witness named Russo. A file that could be used to destroy the career of your chief political rival, Senator Michael Thorne. Isn't that the real prize here, Congressman? Isn't that why you are so desperate to have your mother declared incompetent? So you can search her home with legal impunity and find the weapon you need to win your next election? The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The reporters in the back were scribbling furiously. Julian's face was a death mask, pale and rigid. He stared at Sarah, and then his eyes flickered to me. In that moment, I saw not a son, but an enemy. "This is a fantasy," he spat, his voice trembling with rage. "A paranoid delusion concocted by a failing mind and a manipulative lawyer." I will not dignify it with a response. "I see," Sarah said softly. "Then I have just one more question for you, Congressman. Do you recognize this?" She held up her tablet. On the screen was a crystal-clear image. It was a still from a security camera. It showed a man in a dark suit, his back to the camera, standing in my study in the middle of the night. He was kneeling, his hand inside the open, secret compartment of my replica judicial bench. "This footage," Sarah announced to the silent courtroom, "was taken at 2:14 a.m. 3 nights ago by a motion-activated security camera my firm had installed in Judge Taylor's study at her request. We installed it because she was afraid that someone was entering her home and searching her things. It seems her paranoia was not a delusion after all. Congressman, your wife Isabel testified earlier that she has a key to your mother's house. Do you?" Julian stared at the image, speechless. "Let me ask you another way," Sarah said, her voice like steel. "Is the man in this photograph you, Congressman? Did you use your key to enter your mother's home in the dead of night without her permission to search for the file we've been discussing?" Mr. Davies was shouting objections, but Judge Thompson waved him into silence, her eyes locked on Julian. The silence stretched thick and heavy. Julian began, his voice cracking. "I was concerned. I thought there might be unsecured documents. A fire hazard I was just trying to organize." It was a pathetic, transparent lie, and everyone in the room knew it. He had confessed, not with his words but with his panicked, feeble excuse. He had trespassed. He had searched. He had been caught. Sarah turned to Judge Thompson. "Your Honor, the petitioner has been exposed. His motives are corrupt, his star witness is compromised, and he has been caught on camera committing the very acts of intrusion my client feared. This is not a petition for protection. It is an act of elder abuse and political espionage. We ask that you dismiss the petition with prejudice and consider sanctions against the petitioner and his counsel for filing this motion in bad faith." Judge Thompson looked from the image on the tablet to Julian, her face a study in judicial wrath. She took a deep breath. "The petition for a temporary conservatorship over the person and estate of Judge Avery Taylor is denied," she said, her voice ringing with finality. "With prejudice. This court finds the petition to be frivolous and brought in bad faith. A hearing on the matter of sanctions will be scheduled. Furthermore," she added, her gaze falling on Julian like a physical weight, "this court will be forwarding a copy of this hearing's transcript, along with the submitted evidence, to the district attorney's office for review of potential criminal charges, including breaking and entering and perjury." A gasp went through the courtroom. Isabel let out a small, strangled cry. Julian looked as if he had been physically struck. His political career wasn't just in jeopardy, it was over. And his freedom might be next. Judge Thompson banged her gavel, the sound cracking like a rifle shot in the silent room. "We are adjourned." As she swept from the room, I met her eyes for a fleeting second. I saw no pity, no special treatment. I saw something better. I saw respect. She had seen me not as a patient, but as a peer. A fellow judge. Reporters swarmed us, a chaotic mess of microphones and flashing cameras. Julian and Isabel were hustled out a side door by their lawyer, their faces pale and stricken. Sarah and Alina formed a protective circle around me, guiding me through the throng. As we stepped out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun, I felt a profound sense of release. The immediate threat was gone, but as I got into the car, I knew the war was not over. The Russo file was still missing. I had won the battle, but Julian still held the weapon that could destroy another man's life. And I, in a moment of terrible clarity, remembered exactly what was in that file. I remembered the deal Thorne had made. I remembered the crime he had covered up. And I knew I couldn't let Julian use it, not for his own gain and not for revenge. The law I had served my entire life demanded one more thing from me, to see that the truth, the whole truth, finally came to light. The ride home was strangely quiet. The cacophony of the courthouse scrum faded, replaced by the gentle hum of the car's engine. Alina sat beside me, occasionally patting my hand, her relief a palpable presence in the car. Sarah sat in the front passenger seat, speaking in low tones on her phone, already dealing with the fallout and the next steps. I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window and watched the familiar streets of DC slide by. We had won. A decisive, public, and professionally satisfying victory. But I felt no elation. Instead, a deep, bone-weary sadness settled over me. I had been forced to destroy my own son in order to save myself. The fog, which had been held at bay by the adrenaline of the hearing, began to seep back in, its edges soft and insidious. But before it could fully envelop me, the memory that had sparked on the witness stand roared into full flame. It was as if the courtroom battle had shaken loose a piece of my mind that had been stuck for years. United States v. Sterling et al. The case had been about massive corporate fraud, a pyramid scheme that had wiped out the savings of thousands of small investors. Gerald Sterling was the CEO, the public face of the company. But the architect of the scheme, the man who designed the complex financial instruments that made it all possible, was his partner, a man named Vincent Russo. Russo was the government's star witness. He had cut a deal. He would testify against Sterling, providing the evidence needed for a conviction, in exchange for a reduced sentence. It was a standard, if distasteful, part of the prosecutorial process. The U.S. attorney leading the charge was Michael Thorne, a young, ambitious prosecutor on his way up. But there had been a complication. During a sealed proffer session, a preliminary meeting where a witness reveals what they know, Russo had dropped a bombshell. He confessed that the seed money for Sterling Industries, the initial investment that had launched the entire enterprise, had come from an illegal source. It was laundered money from an offshore account belonging to a notorious arms dealer. And Russo had the evidence to prove it. The problem was, Michael Thorne had a connection to that same arms dealer. Years earlier, as a junior prosecutor, Thorne had led an investigation that had mysteriously stalled, allowing the dealer to escape indictment. If Russo's testimony about the laundered money became public, it would not only complicate the Sterling case, but it would also expose Thorne to accusations of corruption or, at the very least, catastrophic incompetence in his earlier investigation. It would have ended his career before it had even truly begun. So Thorne made a second deal. A secret one. He convinced Russo to omit any mention of the laundered seed money from his public testimony. In exchange, Thorne would ensure Russo received the absolute minimum sentence, served in a low-security facility, and he would personally guarantee that Russo's family was financially taken care of while he was inside. I had suspected it at the time. There was a hole in the timeline of the company's finances that was never adequately explained in court. I had pushed Thorne on it in my chambers. I can still see his face, pale and sweating under the fluorescent lights. He had assured me it was a dead end, an unrelated matter that would only confuse the jury. He had lied, to my face, to a federal judge. After the trial, an anonymous source, probably someone from inside Thorne's own office who had a crisis of conscience, had sent me a package. It contained a transcript of Russo's sealed proffer session, the one where he detailed the money laundering. It also contained a sworn affidavit from the source detailing the secret deal Thorne had made. It was political dynamite. I couldn't use it officially, it was fruit of a poisoned tree, improperly obtained, but I couldn't destroy it either. To do so felt like being complicit in the cover-up, so I had kept it. I had hidden it. It was my insurance policy against a system I knew was flawed, a reminder that the official record is not always the whole truth. And that was the file Julian now possessed. It wasn't just leverage against Thorne, it was proof of felony obstruction of justice. It was enough to send a sitting U.S. senator to prison. "Sarah," I said, my voice cutting through the quiet car, "we need to go on the offensive." She ended her call. "Avery, we just won, you need to rest." "Julian has the file," I said, my voice flat and curt. "The victory in court will make him desperate. He has nothing left to lose. He will leak that file to the press, or he will try to blackmail Thorne directly. Either way, an old injustice will be used to perpetrate a new one." "I will not allow it." "What can we do?" she asked, turning in her seat to face me. "We can't prove he has it." "We don't need to," I said. "We need to get to Senator Thorne. We need to tell him what's coming." Sarah stared at me, her sharp legal mind instantly grasping the implications. "Avery, that's incredibly risky. Approaching a U.S. senator to tell him you know about a crime he covered up decades ago, that could be interpreted as a threat. It could backfire on you." "It is a risk I have to take," I insisted. "Thorne needs to know that the file is in the hands of a man who is both ruthless and cornered. His only chance is to get ahead of the story, to confess, to control the narrative before Julian can use it to destroy him." Back at the house, a sense of grim purpose settled over me. Elena made tea while Sarah and I strategized in the study. The room no longer felt like a sanctuary, but a war room. "Getting a meeting with a senator on short notice is nearly impossible," Sarah said, pacing in front of the fireplace. "Especially now, After today's hearing, the name Taylor is probably toxic on Capitol Hill. I know his chief of staff, I said, a flicker of a memory rewarding my effort to concentrate. A woman named Clara Jennings. She was an intern in my office 25 years ago. A bright girl, idealistic. She still sends me a Christmas card every year. I found her number in my old, leather-bound address book. My hand was steady as I dialed. Clara Jennings' office, a young, efficient voice answered. "This is Judge Avery Taylor calling for Ms. Jennings," I said, the old authority returning to my voice. There was a moment of surprised silence then. "One moment, Judge." Clara came on the line a few seconds later, her voice warm but cautious. "Judge Taylor, it's an honor to hear from you. I saw the news. I'm so glad." "Well, I'm glad it worked out for you." "Thank you, Clara. I'm not calling about that. I'm calling because I have a matter of extreme urgency to discuss with the senator. It concerns an old case, United States v. Sterling." Another silence, this one longer, heavier. I knew she would recognize the name. She would know its significance in the senator's history. "The senator's schedule is very full," she said, her tone guarded. "He will want to make time for this meeting, Clara," I said. "Tell him it concerns the sealed testimony of Vincent Russo. Tell him I know what's in it. And tell him my son, Julian Taylor, now has the file." I heard her sharp intake of breath. "Judge, are you certain?" "Completely," I said. "The senator has less than 48 hours before his life is turned upside down. My son will make his move soon. The senator can either meet with me and prepare for the storm, or he can be swept away by it. It's his choice." "Hold on," she said. I could hear muffled voices in the background, a sense of controlled panic. She came back on the line a minute later, her voice tight. "The senator will meet you, tonight, 10 o'clock, at the Hay Adams Hotel in the lobby bar. Come alone." She hung up. "It's on," I told Sarah. "Tonight, 10 o'clock. Sarah looked worried. "Avery, you can't go alone. Let me come with you." "No," I said firmly. "The instructions were clear. Besides, this isn't a legal meeting. This is a meeting between two people whose pasts are about to collide with the present. It needs to be me." As evening fell, a profound weariness settled over me again. The clarity I'd felt earlier was beginning to fray at the edges. I was terrified I would get to the meeting and the details would be gone, my arguments lost in the fog. I took out the recorder. "Record entry 4, I whispered, my voice shaky. "Meeting with Senator Thorne tonight, 10 p.m., Hay Adams. Objective, to inform him that Julian possesses the Russo file containing evidence of his obstruction of justice. I must convince him to preemptively confess, to control the narrative. Key points to remember: the laundered seed money from the arms dealer, the secret deal with Russo, the lies he told me in chambers. The goal is not to protect Thorne, but to neutralize Julian's weapon and uphold the truth. I cannot let my son's corruption be the final word on this matter." I listened to my own voice play back again and again, trying to burn the words into my unreliable memory. Elena helped me get ready. As I put on my coat, she looked at me with worried eyes. "Be careful, Mrs. Taylor." "I was a judge for 40 years, Elena," I said, patting her hand. "I know how to handle a corrupt politician." But as I sat in the back of the taxi, watching the monuments of Washington sweep by, lit up against the dark sky, I knew this was different. I wasn't in my courtroom anymore. I had no gavel, no robe, no authority but my own fractured memory. I was walking into a meeting with a powerful man whose secrets I held, to warn him that my own son was about to destroy him. The situation was a tangled mess of legal ethics, family betrayal, and old sins. And I, the woman whose mind was fading, was the only one who could unravel it. The taxi pulled up to the grand entrance of the Hay Adams. I took a deep breath, clutched my purse, and stepped out to face the ghost of my most complicated case. The Hay Adams lobby bar was exactly as I remembered it, a hushed, wood-paneled world of quiet power. Conversations were held in low murmurs, deals were struck over single malt scotches. It was a place where secrets felt safe. Senator Michael Thorne was sitting in a high-backed leather armchair in a secluded corner, a glass of amber liquid untouched on the table before him. He looked older than he did on television. The years had carved deep lines into his face, and his eyes, when they met mine, were filled with a weariness that went beyond the day's political battles. He looked like a man who had been waiting for this conversation for 20 years. He rose as I approached. "Judge Taylor," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Thank you for coming." "Senator," I replied, taking the seat opposite him. I did not extend my hand. This was not a social call. A waiter appeared, but I waved him away. I needed my mind clear. "Clara told me what you said," Thorne began, getting straight to the point. "She said you know about the Russo file, and that your son has it." That's correct, I said, my voice steady. The familiar, high-stakes atmosphere of the negotiation was like a tonic, pushing the fog back. He searched my home and stole it from a hiding place. He intends to use it to end your career. After what happened in court today, he has every reason to do so with extreme prejudice. Thorne stared into his glass. I always wondered if you knew about the deal with Russo. I saw it in your eyes during the trial. You knew I was lying to you in chambers. I knew you were withholding something, I corrected him. I didn't have proof. Now my son has that proof. The transcript of the proffer, the affidavit from your staffer, it's all there, isn't it? He nodded slowly, a grim, final admission. Yes, it's all there. He looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw not a powerful senator, but a man trapped by a decision he had made half a lifetime ago. I was young, ambitious. I convinced myself it was for the greater good. Sterling was a monster who had destroyed thousands of lives. Russo's testimony was the only way to put him away for good. If the information about the laundered money came out, it would have resulted in a mistrial, a media circus, and Sterling would have walked free on a technicality. I made a choice. I buried one crime to ensure a conviction for a greater one. You also did it to save your own career, I added, my voice devoid of judgment. It was simply a statement of fact. Yes, he conceded, his voice barely a whisper. I did that too. He took a long drink from his glass. So, what happens now? Julian leaks it, my life is over. I'll be disgraced, disbarred, probably prosecuted. That is one possible outcome, I said. He looked at me, a flicker of something hope, confusion, in his tired eyes. There's another. You can get ahead of it, I said, leaning forward. You can control it. Call a press conference tomorrow morning. Announce that you are voluntarily reopening an inquiry into an old case. Frame it as a matter of conscience, an old wrong you feel compelled to right. Admit that you made a prosecutorial error in judgment 20 years ago. Confess to the deal with Russo. Spin it as a difficult choice made by a young prosecutor trying to put a villain behind bars. It will be a scandal, yes, but it will be your scandal. You will be the one bringing the truth to light, not my son. He stared at me, comprehending the audacity of the strategy. And why would I do that? Why not just wait and see what Julian does? Maybe he'll try to blackmail me privately. Because my son is no longer a rational actor, I said, the words tasting like poison. Today, in court, he lost everything. His reputation, his career, his future. All he has left is revenge. He will not blackmail you. He will annihilate you. He will release that file in the most damaging way possible, with no warning. He will give it to your worst enemies in the press and in your own party. He wants to see you burn. My way, you might get singed, but you might just survive the fire. He was silent for a long time, turning the idea over in his mind. I could see the political calculations running behind his eyes, weighing the odds, assessing the damage. And what do you get out of this, Judge? He finally asked, his voice suspicious. Why help me? Your son tried to destroy you. Why wouldn't you want to see him get his revenge on me? It was the most important question of the night, and I had to make him believe the answer. "'Cause this was never about you, Senator," I said, my voice resonating with the conviction of a life spent in service to an ideal. "This is about the law. My son stole that file to use as a weapon. He perverted a piece of evidence, a piece of the truth, into a tool for blackmail and political gain. That is a desecration of everything I have ever worked for. I will not allow the final act of my career, of my life, to be my son successfully using a stolen document to commit a political murder. The truth in that file deserves to come out, but it deserves to come out in the service of justice, not in the service of vengeance. You will face the consequences of your actions, but it will be on your own terms, not on his." He looked at me, and I saw a glimmer of the idealistic young man he must have once been. He saw that I wasn't there to threaten him or to save him. I was there to offer him the only honorable path left. "You really were the best of them, weren't you?" he said softly. "The last of the true believers." He drained his glass and placed it firmly on the table. "All right, Judge, I'll do it tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. As I left the hotel, a strange sense of peace settled over me. I had done what I had to do. I had set in motion a chain of events that I could not control, but I had acted with purpose and with a clear conscience. But as the taxi neared my home, the peace was shattered. There were police cars parked outside my house, their lights flashing silently in the dark, casting eerie blue and red shadows across the familiar facade of my home. My heart seized in my chest. Was Alina all right? I paid the driver and rushed towards the house, my mind racing through a dozen terrible possibilities. A police officer at the door stopped me. "Ma'am, you can't go in there. This is a crime scene." "This is my house," I said, my voice shaking. "I am Judge Avery Taylor. What has happened? Where is Alina? The officer's expression softened with recognition and pity. Judge, I'm so sorry. There's been a break-in. Your housekeeper, Ms. Morales, she's all right. Shaken up, but she's safe with paramedics in the ambulance. She surprised the intruder. Relief washed over me, so potent it made me dizzy. Alina was safe. But then the officer's next words hit me like a physical blow. The intruder was your son, Judge, Julian Taylor. We have him in custody. I pushed past the officer and ran into the house. The foyer was in disarray, a vase shattered on the floor, and my study, it was destroyed. Books had been swept from the shelves, papers were scattered everywhere, drawers were pulled out and overturned. It was a scene of frantic, violent desperation. He had come back. He had come back for more. But for what? He already had the Russo file. What else could he possibly have been looking for? A detective approached me, a weary-looking man named Diaz. Judge Taylor, I'm Detective Diaz. I'm glad you're here. Your son is not being very cooperative. He keeps saying he was just looking for something that belonged to him. I looked around at the wreckage of my study, the violation of my sanctuary, and then I knew with absolute certainty what he had been looking for. It wasn't a file. It wasn't a document. It was the one piece of evidence that could corroborate the entire story. The one thing that could prove he had been systematically plotting against me for months. He had been looking for my voice recorder. I walked slowly through the debris, my heart pounding. I went to the bookshelf, to the hollowed-out copy of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. I reached in, my hand trembling. The space was empty. The recorder was gone. I turned to Detective Diaz, my mind a sudden, terrifying blank. The shock had brought on the fog, thick and blinding. I couldn't think. I couldn't form a strategy. All I could feel was the chilling realization that my son had not only stolen my past, he had also stolen my voice. He had my memories, my fears, my entire case against him, recorded in my own words. And now I had no idea what he was going to do with it. Detective Diaz was saying something, his voice a low, concerned murmur, but the words wouldn't connect. All I could see was the empty space in the book, the void where my memories had been stored. Julian had it. He had the narrative. He could edit it, manipulate it, release snippets out of context. He could paint me as a vindictive, delusional old woman using my own voice against me. The victory in court, the conversation with Thorne, it could all be undone. Judge Taylor, are you with me? Diaz's voice finally broke through the static in my head. I focused on his face. The recorder, I said, my voice a hoarse whisper. He took a small, black digital voice recorder. Diaz nodded grimly. We found it on him when we apprehended him. It's been logged into evidence. A wave of relief, so intense it almost buckled my knees, washed over me. It was safe. It was in police custody. It was out of his hands. I need to listen to it, Detective, I said, my mind starting to work again. It's vital. It contains evidence regarding my son's motives. We'll have to get a warrant to access the contents, Judge, but given the circumstances, I don't think that will be a problem. We can get it expedited first thing in the morning. The rest of the night passed in a surreal haze. Police officers moved through my house, their presence both a comfort and a violation. Alina, wrapped in a blanket and sipping a cup of sweet tea a paramedic had given her, refused to leave my side. She recounted the story in a shaky voice. She had heard noises from the study, and thinking it was me, she had gone to check. She'd found Julian tearing the room apart. When he saw her, he had become enraged, shouting at her, accusing her of hiding things from him. He had grabbed her arm. She had screamed, and he had panicked and run right into the arms of the police who had been dispatched by a silent alarm Sarah had insisted on activating after the hearing. My son had laid hands on Alina. The thought filled me with a cold fury that burned away the last vestiges of the fog. This was no longer just about politics or money. It was about a fundamental breach of decency, a descent into a kind of madness I could no longer recognize. The next morning, I woke to a world that had been turned upside down. Senator Thorne, true to his word, had held his press conference at 9 a.m. The news was everywhere. He had confessed, not in a torrent of guilt, but with a somber, calculated dignity. He admitted to a grave error in prosecutorial judgment and announced he was asking the Senate Ethics Committee to open a full investigation into his conduct in the Sterling case. He didn't resign, but he stepped down from his committee chairmanships. It was a stunning, preemptive strike. He had seized control of his own downfall. By the time Julian could have leaked the file, it would have been old news, its power as a weapon of blackmail completely neutralized. By noon, Sarah arrived at the house. She had a court order in her hand and a grim look on her face. The DA's office has the recorder, Avery. They've listened to the entries. they're adding charges of witness tampering and intimidation against Julian. The recordings corroborate Alina's statement and establish a clear pattern of harassment and undue influence. She sat down opposite me at the dining room table, the only room in the house that was still in order. "It's over, Avery. He's finished." Politically and perhaps for a long time personally. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt vindicated. But I felt a profound emptiness. I had won. The law had won. Justice, in its messy, imperfect way, had prevailed. But my son was in a jail cell, his life in ruins. There is no victory in that for a mother. In the weeks that followed, the legal machinery ground on. Julian was released on bail, a shadow of the confident politician he had once been. He was facing a mountain of legal trouble, and the party had completely disowned him. Isabel filed for divorce. Senator Thorne faced his ethics committee, his career permanently damaged but not entirely destroyed. He had survived, just as I had predicted. The truth of the Sterling case, after 20 years, was finally part of the public record. I began the slow process of putting my house and my life back together. Alina and I, with the help of the new nurse, Sarah, created a new routine, a new sense of order. There were good days and bad days. Sometimes the fog was thick and I would struggle to remember a name or a word. On other days, my mind was as sharp as it had ever been, and I would sit in my repaired study, reading my law books, feeling like myself again. One afternoon, Sarah brought the recorder back to me. "The DA's office is done with it," she said. "It's yours." I held the small black device in my hand. It felt impossibly heavy. It contained a record of the worst weeks of my life. It was a chronicle of fear, betrayal, and my own failing mind. My first instinct was to destroy it, to erase the painful memories it held. But then I thought about what it truly represented. It wasn't a record of my weakness. It was a testament to my strength. It was the story of a woman who had refused to be erased. It was the tool I had used to fight back when my own mind had become an unreliable ally. It was my voice when I feared I was losing it. I didn't erase the files. Instead, I began to make new ones. "Record entry? I've lost count," I said one sunny afternoon, sitting in the garden, the scent of roses thick in the air. "Today is a good day." I remembered the name of Robert's sailboat, the Just Cause. A fitting name. Alina made lemon scones. They were delicious. I am reading a biography of Justice Ginsburg. She was a giant. I am reminded that a life in the law is a marathon, not a sprint, and the race is not over until it is truly over. I recorded the small moments of grace, the flashes of memory, the simple joys. The recorder was no longer an instrument of war, but a journal of resilience. My son, Julian, eventually pleaded guilty to lesser charges. He avoided a long prison sentence, but his life as he knew it was over. He wrote me a letter from the rehab facility the court had ordered him to attend. It was full of remorse, of excuses, of self-pity. He blamed his ambition, the pressure of his career, the influence of Isabel. He never truly took responsibility for the cold, calculated cruelty of his actions. I never wrote back. Some things are too broken to be mended. Forgiveness is a virtue, but justice requires accountability, and he had never been held truly accountable by his own conscience. My fight was not just for a house or for a file. It was a fight for my identity, for my right to be the author of my own final chapter. The fog may come and go, the pages may sometimes be blurred, but the story is still mine to write. And I have learned that even when memory fails, the truth has a weight and a clarity all its own. It can be hidden, it can be stolen, it can be forgot. But if you fight for it, if you build a fortress for it with the tools you have, it will, in the end, endure. My name is Avery Taylor. I was a judge, and even in the twilight, I will not be dismissed.